After the release of Castlevania Rebirth, the franchise would once again change course. The Nintendo DS trilogy had recently wrapped up, as a new series was now in the works. Funny enough, the Lords of Shadow series were the only games in the franchise that didn't give a go. I'm not sure why that was. It probably had something to do with the Shadow of the Colossus feel about them. I mean, that's not a bad thing. Shadow of the Colossus is a damn good game, only this wasn't that. From that point forward, there was no looking back, and the series shortly after would fall into dormancy the same way the Belmonts laid Dracula to rest every 100 years. There's this preconceived notion that in order for a series to be revitalized, one must often show some sort of financial contribution in efforts to show the IP holder that it's indeed worth their investment to do so. This may come by purchasing collections or remasters of previous entries. Now, I'm quite fond of having these games graphically touched up and readily available, especially for those who may not have had the opportunity to play prior installments. Hell, I'm still waiting for a re-release of Vampire Killer personally, so I get all that. But if you're telling me I have to pay for each game again in order for you to put some effort into a franchise held in the highest regards by the majority, I can't help but to call bullshit. What happened to catering to your fan base that invested their time into you? Imagine if I started a Castlevania marathon and switched midway through to the Mario and Luigi series in hopes to cash in on that ever-changing algorithm. I make videos because I want to. This was never a popularity contest. Hearing from those that send me feedback each week is satisfaction alone. Releasing a collection with little to no added content or incentive to purchase can almost feel like a slap in the face at times. Nevertheless, throughout the past few years, Konami has been delivering many classic bundles, archiving the vast majority of these classics. Still though, no new game. Well, I guess Konami decided to throw us a bone, making a phone call to the homies over at M2 in charge of these fancy new collections. If I had to guess, they probably said to toss in a little something extra to make the old heads happy, and to be fair, M2 does a fantastic job with these. They would begin scouring Konami's catalog, looking for a strong candidate in efforts to recreate some of that early WiiWare magic. They decided to pay old Haunted Castle a little revisit. Just as fans hurried to purchase the all-new Dominus Collection, they would be delighted to discover a surprise upon firing it up. After shortly shuffling through the contents, you will quickly discover the original Haunted Castle. Well, that's a fun little bonus, but what's this? There was something else here directly below it, staring back. Haunted Castle Revisited. Now this is indeed something longtime Vania fans could sink their fangs into. Well, technically it's a remake, but if you're familiar with the likes of Rebirth, then you knew what was up. This wasn't old shit-stained Simon clenching with each step taken. This was proud and powerful Simon, seeking out that redemption arc, now only rebuilt from the ground up. This man deserved better, and sure enough, he'd be handing out those receipts this time around. Where M2 took the initial concepts of Castlevania Adventure and reworked them from the ground up, Revisited in large sticks to the source material. That's not to say the team didn't take liberties throughout, but they did so in a way that could improve the many shortcomings of the arcade original. Now capturing lightning in a bottle twice, they would deliver another dose of that rich and vibrant Rebirth aesthetic, along with an assortment of quality retoolings that will make you grin from ear to ear upon firing this sucker up. It's quite noticeable from the opening reenactment of Simon's big wedding day to Vlad's smooth criminal-esque appeal as he swoops in on poor Billie Jean here. Simon, however, came prepared with a few new tricks up his sleeve, powering up for a Kaioken-sized ass-whooping to be hand-delivered in due time. Speaking of ass-whooping, Simon indeed maintained a high degree of conditioning throughout the years, now as brolic as ever, sporting that thick and chunky stature achieved throughout his first arcade endeavor. Simon still rocks that barbarian garb he's known to cosplay at times, strutting along the castle halls with some real swagger. However, he maneuvers around all that muscle with far greater fluidity that's quite natural to control. Now that's a unit. M2 managed to scale back on-screen sprites to recreate a far greater field of depth when traversing each stage. The accompanied weaponry is slightly reimagined, coinciding more along the classic approach, ditching the swordplay and opting to further upgrade the whip. The Morningstar can now be modified from electrically charged orbs, giving you an edge over the competition. You have an assortment of sub-weapons at your disposal, combining the very best of the arcade with the traditional variety of old, now tweaked just right to take full advantage of this exclusive offering. They also won't fly out of range inconveniently, requiring you to chase them down like rolling quarters in an arcade. The dagger and axe iconically return, delivering some much needed headshots and aerial assaults to your victims. The boomerang shockingly works, just like a boomerang, now similarly to the classic cross of old, returning full circle to even the playing field. The torch also strikes back, only a bit more confined to its proximity, like that of the holy water, preventing Simon from becoming a pyromaniac. The Holy Cross now emits a spiraling ray of light, engulfing the trickier frights just out of sight. Haunted Castle Revisited, or Rebirth 2, whatever you prefer to call it, got the memo, correcting the many criticisms that coincided with the arcade original. This time, we're given a bit more leeway, pumping some additional stock into the life department along with forgiveness when making a fatal misstep. Much like Haunted's Japanese counterpart, hitting the pavement merely results in a percentage of life lost opposed to another playthrough. Where the original constantly starved you out until you just quit, Simon's health replenishes after each round, and food feels far more plentiful and available. Yes, we are eating good, guys, and it only gets better as each level is now broken into segments. As I mentioned in the previous episode, each variation of Haunted Castle had varying degrees of difficulty. Now we have an even playing field, so you can get a little freaky now when committing to those larger obstacles. As our story unfolds, it's made pretty apparent this is indeed Haunted Castle, but with that M2 flavor that made Rebirth so enjoyable. The underlying themes and large remain roughly intact, yet the graphical overhaul is superb, bearing a great deal of polish throughout. This is how you do things, giving veterans of the series a sense of familiarity, while simultaneously instilling a great deal of mystery at every turn. Our previous outing attempted to break you down with unfair scenarios. Fast forward to today, and these same segments have been reimagined, like this Stonehenge-inspired sequence, teleporting down some killer gravestones and upside-down crosses for some unsettling imagery. What are we going to find out next? That Dracula was responsible for the construction of the pyramids? I mean, dude has lived through the times. Events unfold, paying homage to the original as Simon begins to hot-foot it across the graveyard until a fire breaks out once more, keeping you on your toes until you reach Medusa, whom has once again taken to her palace for an age-old rematch. She refined her repertoire as well, now lunging forth for a 1-2 combination that will dice Simon up only to send him packing with a rapid tail strike. Vlad seems to have done quite a bit of remodeling since our last venture. The castle now has this ritzy feel about it, opposed to looking to be headed into foreclosure. The journey below is a brand new experience, alleviating you from the bullshit suffered in years past. Now, you can marvel at the sights etched throughout as you journey the underground passage. However, remain cautious as enemies will indeed manifest when you least expect it, spawning from every corner of the cave for a surprise bombarding. This at times can cheapen the experience for an added layer of challenge, but whoever said Castlevania didn't rest on their laurels. Stage hazards have far more rhyme and reason for their mishaps, strategically placing you in the moment. The Bone Dragon returns and the battle becomes far more interactive to engage in, approaching things far less aimlessly, now giving you breathing room to formulate a plan of attack while you pivot across each platform. Now, this is a castle I can proudly venture through. I can even make out the paintings strung about, along with the references. Very sophisticated works, I must say. The Haunted Mansion vibes are in full effect, potentially paying homage to the late Super Castlevania. I now have an incentive to explore my surroundings instead of just rushing through shit as quickly as humanly possible in fear of a cheap and instantaneous death. M2 got the memo, referencing prior enemies and events while creating new moments all the same, which makes this alternative timeline one I much prefer living in. As you advance, things just seem to fall in place with far less what the F moments. Many OG arcade enemy designs have a fresh makeover, while veteran casting has been added to complement the overarching themes. The music overly delivers, giving us another serving of that M2 variety that rocks out, pulling on your nostalgic chords while delivering a great blend of instrumental variety. Boss encounters canonically play out the way they were initially intended, but with fun creative takes, making them so much fun to throw down with. Hands down, this is my favorite of the 6. Where I once was lost, now I'm found, traveling upwards on an elevator ride to the greatest show in town, the Clock Tower. Now more so a laboratory for testing purposes, remaining faithful to its wacky source material. There's some frightening new discoveries here, including those ever so gruesome Reaper pendulums from Rebirth. Methodically assembled gears that take you to a ghastly destination, where you reunite with Franklin. You discover that the poor lad is currently being tested on, shedding some light on the many horrors his mind has succumbed to. He's just as aggressive as ever, now reaching his threshold, lunging towards you as his undead creator continues to punish him with negative reinforcement. The key here is to stop the Mad Doctor in order to smack Frankie Boy back to his senses. Unfortunately, you can't change his fate, but you can put him at ease, closing out this terrible night for a curse. Drax's chambers lies just ahead as the road paints a far clearer picture. Bats merely complement the layout now as opposed to consuming it prior. Make your way across a mini gauntlet of challengers until you descend down into Vlad's chambers where he patiently waits, placing your true love on full display. Vlad moves quickly to get the upper hand, teleporting in for a good stabbing. He will switch things up, letting his many winged counterparts rotate about for a mix-up of attacks. Find an opening between his knife blade and whip away until this facade fades, revealing his true power, which has apparently quadrupled with a whole ass room of talking heads. You thought Drac was talking that shit prior? Now he's got a whole ass posse ready for a cipher. Each equipped with unique abilities, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse now surround Simon one by one, getting in their shots. The first of 4 will regurgitate the leftover help as a stream of bats lock in on Simon. Keep a close eye out over your left shoulder as you need to remain crouched for a short while, as the second in command will size you up with a piercing glare, emitting an optic blast that can stagger our prideful Belmont. Our third big talker unapologetically turns up the heat for a classical arrangement of fiery pillars. These aren't terribly difficult, planting yourself in between which allows you to focus in on the floating prize above. You want to F around and find out? Then take a crack at the 4th headmaster. He won't hesitate getting his hands dirty, coming forth with a palm-crushing finale to end things early. As the 4 bicker among themselves, continue to target in on the floating orb, which appears to be a manifestation of Vlad's life force. Continue this deadly game of rocks, paper, scissors until his health pinata opens up, leading us to victory, sealing away the Prince of Darkness once more. As our glorious adventure closes out, we can look to the future as Simon Belmont may finally consummate the marriage, bringing forth an heir to the Belmont lineage. Haunted Castle Revisited is an awesome little adventure that came as a shocking surprise. After a decade of silence that birthed new studios in efforts to recapture the series' spirit, it was a joy seeing the classic lineage return. The game undoubtedly delivers, redeeming an arcade classic that never had a fair shot to begin with. The M2 team once again worked their magic on an ill-fated entry, taking the many crippling aspects of the original and recontextualize them, breathing new life into the experience. There's new challenges that arise through reintroduction, bearing creative new takes on gameplay. Although you may get into a bind from the hazards or possibly the time clock itself, you're granted an assortment of checkpoints along with a plentiful array of upgrades to take the time needed to prevail. There's options here to make adjustments on the fly to help reach your in-game goals. With a new classic Castlevania reappearing for the first time in a long time, it's safe to say Konami is listening to their audience. We've seen a revival of the Contra series as of late, so I guess in time we'll just have to see. Now, if only next time around, they could find a way to let me play Vampire Killer. When we return, Alucard will be on the verge of reaching Castle Dracula. However, before he does, I'd like to take a look at one final game in the classic series before ushering in the Metroidvania arc. When we return, we will be looking at Konami's other arcade counterpart, the Versus Castlevania Arcade that is. See you there, gang.